Near the south bend of the Ewaso-Nero River, midday, a baby elephant is in the water. His legs kick, but there is no rhythm. His trunk rises, folds, disappears again. Each surge of current pulls him deeper into the bend, where the slope falls steep and the bottom drops to silt. From the far bank, rangers had just returned from patrol when the sound reached them. Not a trumpet, not a call, but a crash, followed by silence. Kamau was the first to run. The calf was too small to have wandered far, yet there were no other elephants nearby. No adult shadows, no herd. Kamau reached the edge just as the calf's head dipped below the surface again. He didn't wait. The water was cold from last night's rains, faster than usual, and edged with soft clay. Kamau kicked hard, boots dragging behind him. The calf was thrashing now. But it was panic, not controlled. His trunk flailed across the surface, but his back legs no longer kicked. If Kamau didn't get there in time, the weight of his own panic would drown them both. The calf's eyes were wide. Silt covered his ears. One more current rolled him sideways. Kamau reached out, catching the loose fold of skin behind the shoulder. It took both arms to hold. The calf didn't fight. Not anymore. He had stopped kicking. Kamau adjusted his grip and began to pull, slow and low, toward the edge where the reeds dipped under the weight of water. The bank gave no help. It was steep, muddy, collapsing under pressure. Kamau shifted again, now behind the calf, both hands pushing under the small chest. Another ranger reached down with a branch, not to pull the animal, but to stabilize Kamau. The next lurch of the calf's weight nearly took them under again, but then the back legs slid upward. One more heave, and the calf rolled clear. He didn't move. The calf's side rose once, then stopped. Mud clung to his eyelids. Kamau crouched beside him, dripping, breathing hard but quiet. The other rangers watched from a distance. No one said anything. Kamau placed a flat palm just behind the rib cage. He pressed, not hard, but steady. Then again. There was still no sound. One of the rangers stepped forward, but Kamau shook his head. If the calf had swallowed too much, he wouldn't last an hour. If his herd had already passed the river, he wouldn't survive the night. The stakes were exact. If he didn't breathe now, the rescue meant nothing. Kamau pressed again. This time, a faint sputter broke through. Not a trumpet, not a cry. Just one weak spray of water from the trunk. The chest rose. The calf coughed once, then went still again. It was enough. Kamau sat back slowly. The others did not cheer. There was no victory here, not yet. He was alive, but alone, and young enough that even the smallest mistake could still undo everything. Kamau removed his jacket, covering the calf's back. The sun was high, but the water had drained his warmth. His ears barely flicked. There were no adult prints nearby, no distant calls. It was unclear if he had been left, if he had strayed, or if something had happened upstream. For now, all that mattered was breath. One breath, then another. Kamau remained beside him, water dripping from his sleeves. If the calf ran, he could collapse. If they moved him too soon, his lungs could fail. But if they waited too long, and the herd was still searching, they might miss their only chance to return him. The river behind them kept rushing. The mud at their feet trembled with its weight. But above that sound, one soft exhale came again. Then again. And the calf, small and shaking, shifted 1 foot forward into the reeds. The calf did not rise, not even a twitch in the legs. His body lay heavy in the soft curve of the mud, half submerged still, sides sunken inward. Kamau crouched beside him again, his hands now covered in more silt than skin, feeling for movement beneath the ribs. There was none. The sound of the river masked everything. The flow, the weight, the pull of silt slipping back toward water. But Kamau listened anyway. No air, no breath, nothing. He placed both hands flat beneath the chest, just behind the shoulders, and began to press. Once, then again. Slow, rhythmic, focused. Not deep enough to harm, not wide enough to panic the others. The calf's skin gave slightly with each compression, but his ears didn't move. His trunk stayed folded near his mouth like a coiled rope, unmoving. A ranger called softly from the slope. "Kamau!" Kamau didn't look up. He pressed again. It had been over 2 minutes. The calf was still young. If water filled his lungs, it wouldn't take long. If there had been a silent injury in the fall, no one would know. No humans had seen what happened upstream. No elephants had returned to explain it. Kamau adjusted his position, leaning further to one side to drain the calf's shoulder of pooled water. His fingers found the edge of the skin fold beneath the ear. Cold. Still nothing. The weight of failure, though unspoken, had started to gather behind him. Another ranger took one step forward, uncertain whether to stop him or wait. And then it came. Not a trumpet, not a call, just a ripple. The trunk shifted, the tip curling once, then flicking downward like a blade of grass catching a breeze. Kamau froze. He waited. One long second passed. Then the trunk fluttered again, a slow uncoiling, and the calf's chest expanded. Barely. A single breath. Then a ragged cough, muffled in the mud. Kamau sat back slightly, watching now. The calf's ribs lifted again, then fell. This time slower. He wasn't awake, but he was not gone. From the trees behind them, a bird called once, distant, short. The breeze had returned, and with it, warmth. The mud under the calf's belly darkened, wet from new breathing. His ears twitched, barely visible beneath folds of sediment and silt. Kamau reached for his jacket again, soaked from the rescue, and folded it under the calf's neck. The body had stopped convulsing, but his eyes remained closed. "He's breathing," Kamau said. Quiet, plain, but it landed like relief. The other rangers stepped closer now, still slow, no sound louder than the water behind them. One placed a small tarp nearby. Another checked the ridge for signs of the larger tracks. Nothing yet. No return, no herd, only a single calf, unconscious and alone. Kamau stayed close but didn't touch him again. The calf's breathing had found a slow rhythm. His trunk, now half curled near his chest, shifted once more with each exhale. The body was still limp, but heat had begun to return to the skin. The first risk had passed, but the next one was already forming. If the calf rose too soon, he could collapse. If they moved him now, his breath could stop again. If his herd returned and smelled human touch, they might not accept him back. And if no herd came at all, this moment would be the beginning of an entirely different story. One far harder to end well. Kamau watched the eyes, still closed. The ears twitched once more. The mud beneath the ribs warmed gently as the breath continued. Soft, slow, and alive. The sun had climbed higher, drying patches of the calf's skin where the mud no longer held. A light breeze passed through the reeds, brushing across his flank. The breath was steady now, though shallow. Kamau sat a few feet away, unmoving, legs crossed, hands resting on his knees. The others had stepped back toward the trail, leaving only one quiet watchpost on the rise above. It was the first stillness they'd had since the river pulled him under. Then, a shift. The calf's front leg twitched. Just once, enough to stir a small pile of sand. Then nothing. A minute later, his shoulder rose, pressed forward, and with effort, his weight began to roll. One leg straightened, pressing against the earth, but slipped. The second attempt came slower. He pushed his knees under his chest, ribs fluttering from the strain. The ears flicked as he struggled upright, one side first, then the other. Kamau didn't move. Any sound, any shadow too close might send panic through his body and undo the fragile balance he'd just found. The calf's feet were splayed, barely under him. He wobbled, then stood, if only for a moment. His body swayed heavily to one side. His back legs trembled beneath him. For one breath, maybe two, he held. Then the front buckled. The back gave. He dropped hard, kicking a weak cloud of dust around his flank. Kamau exhaled softly but did not step forward. The calf had stood once. That meant the strength remained. But it also meant he might try again too soon. If he fell wrong, on the wrong leg or into the slope, he could fracture a limb. If his lungs strained during the effort, breath might falter again. He was still one step from collapse. The calf moaned softly. Not a cry, just a low vibration in the throat. He turned his head slowly toward the trees beyond the bank. The reeds there parted in the wind, quiet, unoccupied. Still no herd, still no sound. His trunk lifted once, not toward Kamau, not toward the water, but in the direction of that bush line. Then it dropped again into the dust. Kamau understood what that meant. The calf had not forgotten where he came from. He was looking for them, listening, smelling, hoping something familiar would rise from the distance. But nothing came. Another 10 minutes passed. The calf remained still. His ears drooped again, heavier than before. The exertion had drained him. But the signs were clear now. He could rise again if the conditions were right. The question wasn't if he could survive. It was whether he should try before help returned. Kamau rose slowly, brushing his palms clean. He poured water gently into a small dugout near the calf's head, not to drink yet, but for scent, something soft and cool to settle beside him. The calf did not respond, but he didn't flinch either. From the edge of the trail, the radio crackled once. Kamau lifted it to his ear. "No sign yet," came the voice. "Tracks to the south are old." He nodded once and lowered the radio. If the herd had crossed upstream and kept moving, this calf might already be forgotten. But if they were nearby, watching, listening, they had little time left to decide. The calf turned his head once more. The trunk flicked weakly. And then, finally, the eyes opened. Not wide, not alert, just enough to let in light. It was not yet safe, but it was proof that he had not given up. Kamau had not moved in nearly an hour. The calf remained curled on his side, trunk half stretched in the dust. His breathing was quiet but constant, the shallow rise of his ribs timed with the heat now settling over the bank. Across the plain, the air shimmered faintly. There were no hoofbeats, no warning, only the faintest tremor beneath the ground, too soft to be sound, too low to name. Then it came, a low, rolling vibration, steady and distant. Kamau turned his head, eyes fixed on the eastern line of brush where the river curved inland. The reeds there had stiffened. Dust lifted gently from the dry slope, rising in sheets that caught the sun. Another tremor followed. This one is closer. He didn't speak. He didn't stand. From the trees, the first shadow appeared. Broad shoulders, slow steps, ears forward, then another, then 5, 8, a full herd. They moved not with urgency but with intent, spread wide but close enough that the dust never fell between them. Their steps were silent across the plain, as if they had already known exactly where they were going. Kamau backed away quietly, not out of fear, but respect. His role was done now, and anything more would risk what was still fragile. He crouched behind the lower brush, eyes fixed on the calf. The rangers on the ridge had already frozen in place. Not one word passed between them. The matriarch came first. Her left tusk bore a smooth downward curve, worn and familiar. She stopped just past the crest, lifted her trunk once, then lowered it again. No sound, no trumpet, no signal to scatter. Behind her, younger cows followed in staggered formation. 2 juveniles moved wide around the edge, scenting the air, scanning the earth. Their pace never faltered. They knew. The calf stirred. Only slightly, a flick of the tail, the shifting of his back leg, whether it was scent or sound or something deeper, he had felt them return. But he didn't rise. Not yet. The matriarch reached the edge of the reeds, paused, then stepped into the clearing. She approached the calf without hesitation. Her trunk moved once across the dust, not toward Kamau, not toward danger, but directly to the young one's flank. She didn't nudge, she didn't lift. She simply placed the tip against his skin and held it there. The other cows spread around her in a loose half-circle. The juveniles remained back, heads lowered, waiting. One younger female touched the calf's ear briefly. Then I withdrew. Still no sound, no call to gather, no display of urgency, only silence. Kamau remained still. If the herd rejected him now, they would leave without force. If they chose him again, they would stay. But this moment, this silent arrival, would decide everything. The matriarch turned her head slightly, her eyes calm, unreadable. Her trunk moved again, this time brushing gently along the calf's spine. The young one flinched, then stilled. His body didn't rise, but his trunk curled once toward her feet, not fully, not strong, but enough. It was all she needed. She lowered her head, standing guard beside him. The others stepped closer, not crowding, not pushing, just a present, surrounding, protecting. Kamau let his breath out slowly. They had come back. Whether they had searched or simply waited for the right moment, no one could know. But they had come, and they had not hesitated. From the trail above, a faint breeze passed through the brush, lifting the last of the dust into a soft, golden veil. The rangers stayed silent. Below them, the herd stood still, a full circle now, unbroken, with the calf at its center. The air hung thick as the sun dipped lower, pressing heat into the reeds and softening the riverbank with every hour. Kamau remained still, half-shadowed by the slope, his boots sunk in dust. He didn't speak, didn't signal. The herd had claimed the space now, and nothing more was his to give. The calf lay quiet in the sand, breathing slow, barely moving. Still too weak to stand, but still alive. The matriarch stepped forward again. This time her movement was closer, deliberate, direct. She passed beside Kamau with no glance, no sign of alarm, only the calm focus of a creature who had made her decision. Her trunk hovered just above the ground, searching, not sniffing. She turned to face the calf, then lowered herself to her knees beside him. No panic, no rush. She leaned in slowly, brushing dried mud from the young one's side with the softest part of her trunk. It came off in small flakes. She did not stop. She moved along his ribs, his shoulder, behind the ears, not cleaning, not grooming, but clearing space, as if reminding him he was still part of them, still something worth touching, still part of the body they remembered. The others began to gather closer, not chaotic, not loud. One by one they stepped inward, forming a ring so tight around him that the shadows of their bodies stitched together across the dust. The juveniles held back, pacing the outer line, alert but not interfering. Kamau remained crouched, eyes steady. He had never seen this before, not with such calm, not with such purpose. The matriarch stood again, but she didn't lead them away. Instead, she turned and began to dig. It was subtle at first, a slow motion of her front foot, carving a half-circle just behind the calf. Then the trunk, pressing down, pulling back. Dust lifted. Another female joined her, scraping into the earth with gentle force. No rhythm, no frenzy, just the steady motion of large bodies moving earth. They weren't searching for water. They weren't marking the scent. They were building something. Over the next few minutes, 3 others joined. Each worked in silence, carving a shallow depression around the calf's body. Not too deep, not enough to trap, but enough to hold. The soil was still warm from the afternoon heat, but not harsh. They shaped the earth slowly, collectively, the way elephants sometimes prepare a place for their fallen, or for those not yet able to rise. Kamau knew what he was witnessing. It was not a ceremony. It was a shelter. The hollow took form, a soft bed of dust shaped to cradle without pressure. Once the space was right, the matriarch stepped back. She nudged the calf gently toward the center. He didn't resist. His body rolled into the hollow with a low exhale. The dust cushioned him. He remained there, eyes half-lidded, trunk twitching softly. One final elephant stepped forward, the youngest of the cows, and used her foot to pull sand over his back legs, just enough to hold him still, not buried, not hidden, just held. Kamau's chest tightened. It wasn't the rescue they offered now. It was protection, the kind no human could give. They had encircled him not to say goodbye, but to say, "This one is still ours." If he tried to stand again, they would be there. If he faltered through the night, they would guard him. If he died, it would not be alone. A circle in the sand. That was all they made. And for the first time, the calf slept. By late afternoon, the sun pulled long shadows across the river plain. Heat lifted gently from the soil, not harsh now, but fading. The calf lay curled within the shallow depression shaped hours earlier, his body cushioned by sand that no longer clung wet to his skin. The herd had stayed close, silent as before, adjusting the hollow with care only when needed. It was not a nest, not a grave, just a place made soft enough to hold life without hurting it. Kamau had moved no closer. He remained at the edge of the clearing, watching from where the reeds thinned behind him. A ranger brought water in a shallow canvas bowl and placed it just beyond the circle's reach. They did not force it. Nothing here would be forced. The matriarch remained nearby. She stood uphill on the firmer soil just above the hollow, ears gently fanning. Her posture was not defensive, but neither was it passive. She was watching the wind, watching the trees. And when the breeze shifted, she turned slightly and repositioned her front feet, always facing outward, guarding the calf's rest. From time to time, another elephant stepped close to adjust the shape. One pressed her trunk into the rim and pulled outward. Another dragged a foot sideways to create a shallow runoff channel, allowing the cooler earth below to settle. No words passed between them, but their movements were not random. They had done this before, perhaps for their own, perhaps for others lost. The calf stirred, not in pain, just shifting. His legs twitched gently, then fell still again. His trunk had stopped curling now, resting against his front foot. His ears lifted once, caught the breeze, then dropped. Kamau knelt in the grass and whispered. More to himself than to anyone, they knew what he needed. The herd continued their quiet work. None called, none trumpeted. No show of fear, no demand for space. Just a steady presence. It was their answer to the day's violence. Not retreat, not fury, but patience. This was what survival looked like when shaped by memory and muscle, not panic. No noise. A young male, barely older than the calf, approached the edge. He did not enter the hollow. He lowered his head, touched his trunk once to the dust nearby, and remained still. A moment passed, then he turned away. No pressure, no challenge, just acknowledgement. Kamau noted the movement. Every step they took confirmed the calf was no longer alone. They had accepted him back, or perhaps never truly left. The risk remained, of course. If the night grew cold, if he weakened again, there would be little anyone could do. But they had done what mattered. They had given him shelter, not from weather, but from separation. Evening drew closer. The wind softened. The matriarch stepped forward again, stood over the hollow and lowered her trunk once more to the calf's side. She didn't move it, just rested it there. A weightless presence. A reminder. In the hush that followed, Kamau finally stood. He turned to the ranger behind him and nodded toward the slope. "We leave them now," he said. The ranger hesitated. "No sign of the others?" "Doesn't matter." The rangers walked back toward the trees without sound. Behind them, the herd stood still. One body larger than it was hours ago. One life resting in a hollow carved not by storm or tragedy, but by memory. Dust held him now, and dust remembered. The rain came just before midnight, soft, steady, without wind. It soaked the hollow but didn't pool. The herd had moved slightly uphill, forming a loose ring around the calf through the night. They didn't sleep. Not deeply, not all at once. One always remained standing, ears tilted outward, trunk hanging low, shifting weight from foot to foot. The calf stayed curled in the center, damp but undisturbed, his body tucked into the earth shaped for him. By dawn, the storm had passed. Light touched the treetops first, brushing silver across the sodden plain. Mist clung to the reeds. Kamau stood beside the ridge, a few paces from where he had watched yesterday's circle form. His boots were wet, his coat held the smell of rain. He had not left. Below, the herd began to stir. The matriarch moved first, stepping forward with deliberate care. She leaned her trunk into the hollow and touched the calf's shoulder. No sound, no signal, just one nudge. The calf shifted, slowly, legs unfolding beneath him like brittle branches, unsure if they still belonged. His back leg kicked once, weakly, then held. His ears lifted halfway, then dropped again. The matriarch did not push. She waited. He tried again. His front knees straightened, then trembled. His chest rose. Dust slid from his side as he leaned forward, pressing weight into legs that had not held him for nearly 2 days. For a moment he froze. Then, with no fanfare, no cry, he stood. His stance was crooked, soft at the knees. But he stood. The herd remained still. One juvenile shifted to make space. Another stepped slightly aside, opening a path just wide enough for small feet. The matriarch turned, walking forward without looking back. The calf followed. Not fast, not strong, but forward. He passed beneath the body of a larger female, brushing his flank against her front leg. She adjusted her step slightly, not to lead, but to steady. The others formed a quiet corridor around him. No trunk reached out. No one tried to lift. He walked on his own, as far as the dust allowed. Kamau did not move. He watched from the slope, hands folded at his back, his face unreadable, his posture still. The rain had washed the edges of the hollow into a smooth, shallow basin. No trace of struggle remained. Only one clear set of prints. Small, uncertain but steady, leading away from it. The herd continued toward the northern brush, following the drier rise. The matriarch led without pause. Behind her, the others flanked the calf, not protecting him from harm, but letting him exist again in their shape. He was no longer outside the circle. He was its center. The sun lifted. The grass bent in the breeze. Kamau remained at the ridge until the last shape disappeared behind the trees. He said nothing, made no call, took no step forward. There was nothing more to do. The elephant had walked again. And he hadn't done it alone. 3 days later, Kamau returned to the bend alone. The river had receded slightly since the rain. The curve no longer pulled as strong, and the slope was firmer now beneath his boots. Morning light skimmed the surface of the water, catching in quiet ripples as it moved past the reeds. A few birds called near the trees, but the place held stillness more than sound. The hollow was gone. The space where the calf had rested, shaped by trunks and feet, pressed by hours of breathing dust, had folded back into the land. New grass had started to rise across the center, thin blades poking through flattened soil. Nothing sharp remained, no marks of struggle, no edges. just softened earth that I remembered. Kamau stepped carefully, not over it, but around. He stood a few feet off from where the outer ring had once formed and scanned the slope. No trash, no tools, no sign that humans had touched this place beyond that day. The silence was full, not empty. He walked along the path the herd had taken, where their prints had led up toward the northern brush. Most were gone now, blurred by wind, scattered by small rains, softened under heat. But near the edge of the old trail, just before the ground lifted, 2 prints remained. One was large, worn at the edges, deeply set. The other, beside it, is smaller, shallow, a round depression no longer than a boot length pressed close to the older set. Not overlapping, not behind, beside. Kamau crouched. He didn't touch them. He only looked. The smaller print had held together, perhaps protected by shade or the angle of wind. Its outline wasn't sharp, but it was clear. A young foot walking forward. He stayed there a moment longer, then stood. Behind him, the river moved on. Slow now, almost soundless. The herd had not been seen since they disappeared into the northern trees. Rangers had checked the far ridge once. No fresh tracks, no clear trail, but no signs of distress either. Wherever they had gone as a full herd. Kamau didn't try to follow. He didn't mark the place. He didn't name it. He simply stood where they had crossed. What had happened here wouldn't be written anywhere, not on paper, not in reports. It would pass instead by quiet telling, among rangers on slow mornings, among those who'd seen too many injuries, too many losses that came too late. Someone would say, Kamau was there when the herd dug for him. And the others would nod. Because sometimes the best things left behind were not the stories, but the ones who kept walking after them. Kamau turned back toward the trees. The wind moved lightly across the grass behind him. The prints remained. 2 of them. One deep, one small, both forward.